Doing, everybody? Mr. V here. I have a really exciting video today planned for you in the conversation with an expert playlist, I guess we'll call it. Last time we sat and spoke to Mr. Green for a little while about the teenage brain, and it was a really awesome video. Got a lot of positive feedback from it. And so in the same kind of vein, today we are going to be speaking to our school psychologist, Dr. Hyle, and she is going to be telling us about, well, a couple things. We're going to talk a little bit about CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. But even more specifically, we're going to talk about thinking traps or cognitive distortions. So I don't want to say too much. I want to pass it over to Dr. Hyle to introduce herself and then get this thing started. So Dr. Hyle, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Villanova. I'm excited about this topic, excited about the conversation, and excited to kind of share this with the 7th grade. So, hey guys, how's it going? Wanted to kind of just give a brief overview because I'm sure many people have heard of the acronym CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but maybe don't know too much about it. So I just wanted to quickly speak about some of the basics. So when we think about cognitive behavioral therapy, we think about how our brain and our behavior and our thoughts, our feelings, how everything's kind of interconnected, right? So cognitive behavioral therapy has a symbol to help us kind of understand how everything is interconnected. It's called the cognitive triangle. And it shows us that our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors are all interconnected, right? So when we have a thought that is happy, right? A positive thought about something, really maybe something great happening, getting 100 on a test, going skiing with the family, anything that is really, really positive. We might be thinking, hey, I'm having a great time. This is awesome. Positive thought leads to happy emotions, right? I'm feeling good about this. This is a great activity, a great situation. I'm feeling excited about an upcoming trip or event. And then our behavior that comes after we're feeling happy is usually something that's positive, right? We're doing fun activities. We're not getting upset and crying. Crying would be a behavior, and we wouldn't cry if we were feeling happy and having positive thoughts. So it's all kind of interconnected. And like Mr. Villanova said, what we're gonna focus on a little bit today is some thinking traps. So this is when our brain kind of plays tricks on us a little bit, which is sounds kind of funny, but it's true. It happens all the time to all of us, and we just wanted to kind of let you guys know about this so you can start to capture when your mind is playing tricks on you. Go ahead, Mr.
I just wanted to jump in to say that CBT, I think, is probably like my favorite kind of approach to therapy, just because I feel like, and I don't know that this is necessarily true because I haven't researched every approach to therapy, but it just seems so widely applicable to everybody, whether or not you are dealing with something or not, whether or not whether you think you need therapy or not. Like, we all have a brain, and sometimes it has a mind of its own, and learning how to be aware of your thoughts and make adjustments to those thoughts and stuff, and learning how your thoughts impact your behavior is who wouldn't benefit from that?
And it's not even that it has to be therapy in order to benefit, right? Just understanding the connections and being able to recognize that in yourself, in your own life as you go about your day to day, that's helpful. Just being able to say, hey, listen, wait a second, I think I'm having a negative thought right now, and therefore I'm feeling a little bit, down about this. Let me see if there's something I can do to change this. Just recognizing it. You don't necessarily need a therapist in front of you to be able to kind of understand some of these concepts and make them applicable to your life. So that's what's so great about it.
And right off the bat, what I'm hearing you say a lot of is I hear the word awareness a lot. Yep. So it sounds like what you're saying right off the bat, before we get even into any of these things, is you need to try to become more aware of what's going on inside your head.
It's about better understanding yourself, right? Knowing what's going on for you. Everybody's different. Everybody has different thoughts, different feelings. Everybody experiences a different range of emotions. And certainly, as we can all see, in the day-to-day, everybody behaves a little bit differently. Some people are more vulnerable to get upset quicker, and other people have a more, calming demeanor and really don't let, little things bother them. But it's recognizing, which end of the spectrum you land on, or are you somewhere in the middle, and being able to appreciate that about yourself and understand how you can use that information to help make your situations and your events and your life, a little bit more positive, because there's a lot going on, right? Especially now, we got a lot going on. So
yeah, you're not kidding.
Bringing awareness to the fact that it's okay, that we're all different in this regard, and just understanding ourselves is what it's all about.
Right. So actually, as we head right into these 5 cognitive distortions that you want to talk about, I guess what you just said seems like a good disclaimer, which is like, hey, if you experience these 5, any of these 5 or all of these 5, that makes you pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
Like I think we all experience them. So if you're hearing them and you're like, my goodness, I experienced this, some of these, like, you're not alone.
Exactly. Every day, we all fall into these thinking traps from one time or another, right? So it's our brain playing tricks on us. It's our brain saying, I'm gonna take a situation and I'm going to look at it from a negative perspective. And it's our ability to recognize that we're doing that, and then change that thought that helps us handle tough situations better. But it happens to all of us. You're right.
All right, great. So why don't you take us through one at a time, these 5 distortions?
All right, excellent. So one of the distortions that I find myself falling into, and I think I find a lot of students and even some colleagues falling into, is jumping to conclusions, right? I think we all kind of at times find ourselves thinking ahead of a situation and maybe assuming what's going to happen before we really know all the facts. And most times our assumptions are of the negative, persuasion. Like we're thinking, something bad's going to happen. I'm gonna fail this test, or my friend must be mad at me because they didn't call me back last night, without really understanding. Wait a second, maybe my friend was busy or had a family event, or with a test related, maybe I just needed to study a little bit more, or maybe I am prepared and I'm doing okay, and I'm just setting myself up for failure by assuming, jumping to that conclusion, it's going to go bad, because it's not. That's not always the case, but we allow ourselves to do that a little bit too frequently, I think.
Yeah, we do, and I'm thinking as we transition back into full-time learning, I think obviously the hybrid thing has been difficult, but I have heard that some kids have felt that they've gotten used to and started to even appreciate the small class environment with only a couple kids in the room. You get a lot of attention from the teacher, and so a cognitive distortion, jump to conclusions, and it could be that you are assuming when you get back to school on Monday and you have now 20 kids in your class, my grades are going to suffer. I'm not going to get the attention that I need. I'm never going to feel comfortable enough to raise my hand and get that question answered. And it's like, well, wait, how do you know you're going to feel that way? How do you know you're not going to get the attention? How do you know your grades are going to drop, And
if you're thinking those thoughts before you even walk through the door on Monday, you're not going to feel pretty great about coming here, right? You're not going to feel excited to be back, because you're assuming the worst. You're jumping to conclusions there. So there are different ways that we can kind of reframe and change that thinking to make you feel a little bit better coming in, because it is going to be an adjustment, but it's going to be a great day Monday for sure. Awesome. Good one. What do you got? What's next? One of the other cognitive distortions, or we'll call it thinking trap, like, right, our thoughts are getting caught in that negative trap there, is should statements, right? So I should be better at this. I should be getting all 100s in my classes. I should get every single question right. Those are problematic because we're all human, right? And everybody, makes mistakes, and we kind of have to allow ourselves some grace and some flexibility. And, being extra hard on ourselves does not make a situation better. It, makes us feel a little bit worse about what's going on.
I have a story I wanted to share about the should statements. Back when I was in college, like a million years ago, long before I knew anything about CBT or cognitive thinking traps and all this stuff, I played baseball in college, and I was always looking to get a competitive edge over the other people. I wanted to be great, and I was willing to do whatever it took. So I started seeing a sports psychologist to try to address my mind. I wanted to be sharp with my skills, with my baseball skills, but I also wanted to be strong mentally. Because in baseball, if anybody who plays baseball, you fail more often than you succeed, right? If you bat 300, that's a Hall of Fame batting average, but that means you're failing 7 out of 10 times. So that was hard for me. And so I would find that if, like, in my first at bat in a game, if I struck out or had a really bad at bat, or the pitcher threw a really great pitch and I knew I should have hit a home run on it, like, oh, it was great, I saw it, and then I missed it, I found that I would be thinking about that throughout the rest of the game, and I'd be distracted by the fact that I should have crushed that pitch, but I didn't. And then it affected my second at bat, third at bat. Then I made an error in an outfield because I'm not concentrating. And the therapist introduced me to this idea of the should statements, and that it's wasted energy focusing on what should have been. And that really began to, I focused on trying to fix that, and that helped a lot.
So drawing your awareness to the fact that that's how you were thinking, did it then affect the way you thought about baseball and about the game later on? Like, did you change your mentality? Did you give yourself a little bit more grace the next time you got up to bat? Yeah,
I did, because once I realized that my thought patterns were directly related to the success that I was going to experience or not experience, I was like, well, I want to be great, so I'm going to focus. I'm going to work hard in practice. I'm going to do everything I can physically to make sure I'm as good as I could be. Well, now that I know that my brain plays a role in that, I attacked it and I worked on it, and I wasn't perfect, but I got better at it.
That's a great example about how your thoughts affect your feelings, and how those feelings then affect your behavior and the success, like you said, the output. That's a really great example. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. What else you have? What's number 3 for us?
So, one thing I find myself doing, I think I find a lot of other people doing a lot of the time too, is kind of like disqualifying or forgetting about the positives in a situation, right? Like, we got something going on where there might be, there are always positives and negatives to almost every situation, right? Good things and bad things. It's rare that we find a situation where there is only positives, right? Or only negatives. An example would be, let me think of an example.
Well, you know what? It could be coming back to school again on Monday.
There are tons of positives and potential negatives depending on somebody's point of view, someone's perspective to that scenario, right? So if we list them out, made a pros and cons list and looked at all the positives and negatives, and then we only focused on the negative list, that would be the thinking trap of disqualifying the positives, right? Like, we're forgetting to realize some of the good in the situation, and we're only focused solely on the negative. How's that going to make us feel?
Yeah,
not so great, probably, right?
I love the pros and cons list. The idea that you brought up. That's like, one of my go-tos, and whenever I need to kind of get in line and fix up my thought process.
And I use it all the time for decision making, or it's helpful. It's helpful for me because it's one thing to talk about the pros and cons, the positive, negatives. It's another thing to see it in writing, right? So to put it down on paper and say, well, wait a second, I got way more positives over here than I do negatives. Why am I still feeling so bad about this?
Mm.
And that's where you can come in and kind of switch that thinking like you talked about.
Right. Yeah. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you got?
So, I also think that the thinking trap that I again find myself falling into, and I know others do as well, something called like the repetitor, where we feel like this situation happened once, right? This is how it went down once, so it's going to happen like that every other time, right? To assume, again, you're assuming the negative. You're going to assume that maybe if I got a 70 on a math test one time, why do I even need to try the rest of the marking period? Because I'm just going to get bad grades for every other test that comes after. And that's just not true, right? Because we all know that we prepare separately and differently for each test. There are lots of factors that go into the grades that we get, including the effort and the preparedness, and really our state of mind when we're walking into a test, things like that. So if we believe that one bad thing is going to then cause multiple bad things to follow, we're not going to be too happy with what's going on. And sometimes we get into those repetitive kind of mindsets, and it's not good for us. It's not healthy.
Would an example of that also be like in a social situation where a kid, let's say a kid asks another kid to hang out on the weekend and they say no or something, and then that you never ask them again because you just assume, well, you know what, they said no, so they must not like me, they must not be interested, they'll just say no again, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to ask them.
Absolutely. That's a combination of a couple thinking traps there. So we're assuming the worst, like we're jumping to conclusions that, he must not like me. But in reality, if you think about it, you sit down with your friend, or you find out more information, you check the facts. Maybe your friend had a family obligation, right? It's not that they didn't want to hang out with you. It's that they had something else they couldn't not go to. Right. But if you ask them next weekend, yeah, the answer may be different. The answer may be, yeah, let's hang out. So believing that that's going to be the answer from your friend every single time is a perfect example of the repetitor that gets us, gets us feeling a little down. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, that is a good one. It's unbelievable. The more we talk about these, the more I'm like, gosh, I think I do these, all of them, on a daily basis. The only difference is, as an adult, I've learned a little bit of how to overcome these things to some degree, so I can function. But I mean, really, every one of them. And
the last one I was going to talk about, very similar, because a lot of them are not too far off from one another. Something called like the fortune teller, right? Where we feel like we can predict the future, right? So in that instance you just gave about, friends maybe not wanting to hang out one weekend, we're predicting the future by assuming they're not going to want to hang out any other weekend after that, when in reality that's probably not true. And predicting the future is, in terms of like coming back to school, it may be, today's a few days before we come back. We've got the whole weekend ahead of us. We may think that the Monday coming in is going to be difficult, right? Or it might not go as planned, and we may spend the whole weekend worried about something, or nervous about what it's going to be like, not really knowing. And we can't predict the future. We certainly don't want to expect bad things to happen, right? That's when we talk about being mindful and kind of being present in the moment, so that we're not wasting excess energy worrying about the future. We also, if we're gonna be thinking about the future, then maybe we could put a little bit more of a positive spin on it, so that it's not wasted energy. We reframe that and think about the positives on that con list, right? Like, what are we looking forward to coming back to school? Because there is so much that means for us in a positive way. Seeing all of our friends, getting 5 days a week face-to-face instruction with our teachers, which is going to be helpful for everybody. Really just kind of feeling a greater sense of normalcy. Like, this is what we're used to be doing. So if we're going to focus on the future, let's focus on the positives in the future, because assuming that things will go badly is not going to do us any favors.
Right. Wow. These are good. And there's so many more cognitive distortions out there, but these 5 right here, I think just apply to everybody. They're so good. I think I would like to spend just a couple minutes talking about, like, so now we're aware of some of these thinking traps that we're doing and experiencing. Like, what do we do? How do we overcome them? I heard a quote once I can't remember the full quote, but it was something like, if we only realized how powerful the brain was, or how powerful our thoughts were, we would never have another negative thought in our life. Not that we can, you can't always control what thought pops into your head.
Right.
But one thing I always say to kids, and tell me if you think this is good advice to give. One thing I always say to kids is like, yeah, that thought got in there. Somehow it just happened. And you sometimes can't control that, but you don't have to believe every thought that you have. Like, you got to start to train yourself to confront your thoughts and challenge your thinking. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you brought up a great point. Like, those automatic thoughts creep up on us kind of out of nowhere. And they usually come in the way of some negativity, like, I'm not good at this. Like, that may be an automatic thought when you step into the gym and you see, the tennis nets up, right? Like, maybe tennis isn't your hand or eye coordination might not be the greatest. You may say, this is gonna be hard. I'm not good at this. Those automatic thoughts, definitely recognizing when they're popping in and then trying to reframe that. So what I mean by reframing a thought is taking a thought that is inherently negative and going to cause us to have some negative emotion and then probably affect our behavior, right? If we don't feel so good walking into the gym playing tennis, do you think we're going to perform well? Like, similar to your baseball story, probably not. It's going to affect the way that we are successful, the way we conduct ourselves. So how do we reframe that thought, right? So in that example, you walk in, your automatic thought is, oh gosh, I'm not so good at this. You could walk in and say, you know what? I haven't played tennis in a while, but I'm gonna give it a go, and this is gonna be okay. Even just, saying to yourself some positivity, this is gonna be okay. It's been a while. It might not be the greatest, but I'm going to be okay with it. That right there affects how we're feeling, and it's going to affect how we play. So if we can capture ourselves having those automatic thoughts, and then switching that idea to something a little bit more positive, it makes a world of difference.
That's a good tip. Something you said also made me think of another thing that I oftentimes will tell kids. It's like, think about that athlete, for example, who just like dominates their sport. Yeah. Pick one, LeBron James, right? Did he just wake up one day and he was just LeBron James, the greatest athlete, the greatest basketball player of all time? No. I think we can all agree, like, he's probably put in a lot of hard work over the years to achieve that. And I've come to feel like in life that when you come across people that are just insanely positive all the time, that I wonder, I think that at some point in their life, they probably trained themselves to be that way. They probably worked hard to become somebody who sees the positive in everything, right? I mean, because it feels sometimes like human nature is not so much like that.
That's a great point. It's not, this isn't something you're gonna wake up one day and say, oh, I have no more negativity, no more negative thoughts. Similar to the way that professional athletes or musicians, that the practice that people put into perfecting their skills, this is one of those skills that needs that same level of practice. And listen, it's not going to come easily. It's not going to happen overnight. But if you can, catch yourself, at once a day or so, maybe having one of these cognitive distortions, falling into a thinking trap, noticing a negative automatic thought, and then really trying to just reframe it, even just once. It's going to you'll see the effects of how it improves, your mood and your functioning. And like you said, it's going to take time. It's a skill that we need to train ourselves, because even into adulthood, we all still do this sometimes. But like you said, you've tried to get better at this, as have I.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
I guess to sum up what I think I've learned here is that, so we all experience these negative, untrue thinking traps, thoughts and stuff, but the key is awareness. The key is trying to identify that it's happening. The sooner you can identify it, probably the better. And then it sounds like we need to then begin to challenge that thought. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes will say, like, ask yourself, well, what's the evidence that that's true? Like, what is the actual evidence? So you challenge your thought. Mm-hmm. And then I heard you say after that, then we need to then begin to like reframe it, restructure it, change the thought from negative and untrue to positive and true or something.
Absolutely. You summed it up beautifully. That's exactly the progression of how we would go through this. Yeah. And like I said, it takes practice, but it's definitely worth trying. And if you need help with this, anybody, Mr. Villanova's a great asset. His door's always open. I'm sure he would love to see people, come down and share their thoughts on these different techniques and these different things that we talked about today. And my door is always open as well to everybody.
Yep. And also Mr. Green, our social worker, who's located upstairs, he would love to talk. He loves chatting about stuff like this. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you saying that, Dr. Hyle. Yeah, I'm always available for the kids, and I love talking about these things. Even if you're not necessarily struggling with anything, you just maybe you want to learn more about these things or hear about some of the other thinking traps that we didn't talk about. That would be fun, I would enjoy that. So on that note, mm-hmm. I want to thank you, Dr. Hyle, for taking a couple minutes more. I think we probably took a little more time than we thought, but it was fun, and I'm glad we did it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was great to talk through this, because just like you, I love kind of troubleshooting and talking through some of the things that are going on for all of us. So I appreciate the conversation.
All right. Well, on that note, everybody, if you enjoyed it, I hope that you will like the video, leave a comment. But until the next one, stay motivated, everybody.